I mean, is it really possible to receive somebody like me? I do understand that. I mean, is it possible to sit me, such a Ferdishchenko, next to a refined gentleman like Afanasy Ivanovitch? We're left willy-nilly with only one explanation: they do it precisely because it's impossible to imagine. But though it was crude, all the same it could be biting, sometimes even very much so, and that, it seems, was what Nastasia Philippovna liked. Those who wished absolutely to call on her had no choice but to put up with Ferdishchenko. It may be that he had guessed the whole truth in supposing that the reason he was received was that from the first his presence had become impossible for Totsky. Ganya, for his part, had endured a whole infinity of torments from him, and in that sense Ferdishchenko had managed to be very useful to Nastasia Philippovna. And I'll have the prince start by singing a fashionable romance, Ferdishchenko concluded, watching out for what Nastasia Philippovna would say. I think not, Ferdishchenko, and please don't get excited, she observed dryly. Ah. If he's under special patronage, then I, too, will ease up. But Nastasia Philippovna rose without listening and went herself to meet her guest. I regretted, she said, appearing suddenly before the prince, that earlier today, being in a flurry, I forgot to invite you here, and I'm very glad that you have now given me the chance to thank you and to praise you for your determination. Saying this, she peered intently at the prince, trying at least somehow to interpret his action to herself. The prince might have made some reply to her amiable words, but he was so dazzled and struck that he could not even get a word out. Nastasia Philippovna noticed it with pleasure. This evening she was in full array and made an extraordinary impression. She took him by the arm and brought him to her guests. Just before entering the reception room, the prince suddenly stopped and, with extraordinary excitement, hurriedly whispered to her. Everything in you is perfection, even the fact that you're so thin and pale. One has no wish to imagine you otherwise. I wanted so much to come to you. Forgive me. Don't ask forgiveness, Nastasia Philippovna laughed. That will ruin all the strangeness and originality. And it's true, Then, what they say about you, that you're a strange man. So you consider me perfection, do you? I do. Though you're a master at guessing, you're nevertheless mistaken. I'll remind you of it tonight. She introduced the prince to the guests, the majority of whom already knew him. Totsky at once said something amiable. Everyone seemed to cheer up a little, everyone immediately began talking and laughing. Nastasya Philippovna sat the prince down beside her. But anyhow, what's so astonishing in the prince's appearance? Ferdishchenko shouted louder than everyone else. The matter's clear, it speaks for itself. The matter's all too clear and speaks all too much for itself, the silent Ganya suddenly picked up. I've been observing the prince almost uninterruptedly today, from the moment he first looked at Nastasya Philippovna's portrait on Ivan Fyodorovitch's desk this morning. I remember very well that already this morning I thought of something which I'm now perfectly convinced of, and which, let it be said in passing, the prince himself has confessed to me. Ganya uttered this whole phrase very gravely, without the slightest jocularity, even gloomily, which seemed somewhat strange. I didn't make any confessions to you, the prince replied, blushing, I merely answered your question. Bravo, bravo! Cried Ferdishchenko. At least it's candid, both clever and candid. Everyone laughed loudly. Don't shout, Ferdishchenko, Tin observed to him disgustedly in a half-whisper. I didn't expect such prowess from you, Prince, said Ivan Fyodorovitch. Do you know what sort of man that suits? And I considered you a philosopher. Oh, the quiet one. And judging by the way the prince blushes at an innocent joke like an innocent young girl, I conclude that, like a noble youth, he is nurturing the most praiseworthy intentions in his heart. The toothless and hitherto perfectly silent 70-year-old schoolteacher, whom no one would have expected to make a peep all evening, suddenly said, or, better, maundered. Everyone laughed still more. The little old man, probably thinking they were laughing at his witticism, looked at them all and started laughing all the harder, which brought on so terrible a fit of coughing that Nastasya Philippovna, who for some reason was extremely fond of all such original little old men and women, and even of holy fools, at once began making a fuss over him, kissed him on both cheeks, and prowess. Ordered more tea for him. When the maid came in, she asked for her mantilla, which she wrapped around herself, and told her to put more wood on the fire. Asked what time it was, the maid said it was already 10:30. Ladies and gentlemen, would you care for champagne? Nastasia Filipovna suddenly invited. I have it ready. Maybe it will make you merrier. Please don't stand on ceremony. The invitation to drink, especially in such naive terms, seemed very strange coming from Nastasia Filipovna. Everyone knew the extraordinary decorum of her previous parties. Generally, the evening was growing merrier, but not in the usual way. The wine, however, was not refused, first, by the general himself, second, by the sprightly lady, the little old man, Ferdishchenko, and the rest after him. Totsky also took his glass, hoping to harmonize the new tone that was setting in, possibly giving it the character of a charming joke. Ganya alone drank nothing. In the strange, sometimes very abrupt and quick outbursts of Nastasia Filipovna, who also took wine and announced that she would drink 3 glasses that evening, in her hysterical and pointless laughter, which alternated suddenly with a silent and even sullen pensiveness, it was hard to make anything out. Some suspected she was in a fever. They finally began to notice that she seemed to be waiting for something, glanced frequently at her watch, was growing impatient, distracted. You seem to have a little fever? Asked the sprightly lady,